Himachal Pradesh, known as Dev Bhumi, or the Land of Gods. We'll discover why this Himalayan state's culture has survived centuries of change, how its people maintain their unique identity, and what makes their traditions so captivating. With us is a cultural expert who spent years studying the region's heritage.
You know, what's fascinating about Himachal Pradesh is how its geography actually helped preserve its culture. The mighty mountains created these natural safe havens where traditions could flourish undisturbed for thousands of years.
That's really interesting. Can you tell us more about these traditions that have been preserved?
Well, according to historical records, Himachal's cultural roots trace back to Vedic times. What's remarkable is how different faiths, Hinduism, Buddhism, and even primitive shamanism, have coexisted peacefully here for millennia.
And this religious diversity, I imagine it's reflected in their daily life?
Absolutely. In fact, village life still centers around temples of Devi and Devta, their local gods and goddesses. These aren't just places of worship, they're the heart of community decision-making.
Wait, so these temples actually play a role in governance?
Yes, and here's something fascinating. Traditionally, shamans in trance states would often act as adjudicators of good and evil in society. It's a unique blend of spiritual and social authority that still influences community life today.
That's incredible. Let's talk about the people themselves. Who are the main communities in Himachal?
The state has several major tribal groups. The Gadi, Gujjar, and Kinara tribes make up about 82% of the total scheduled tribes population. Then you have smaller groups like the Bodh, Pangwala, and Swangla.
And each of these groups has their own distinct traditions?
Exactly. Take the Bodh community in Lahal, for example. They've maintained their unique cultural practices despite being isolated by heavy snowfall for nearly 6 months each year.
6 months? That's half the year.
Yes, from mid-November to mid-May. But you know what's really interesting? When they were asked about building tunnels to connect them year-round, many actually opposed it, fearing it would disrupt their peaceful way of life.
Let's shift gears a bit and talk about art. I've heard Himachal has some unique artistic traditions.
Oh yes, particularly their paintings. The Kangra school of painting is probably the most famous, known for its delicate lines and natural colours. These paintings often depict scenes from Indian mythology, especially love stories like Radha Krishna.
And there's another form of painting unique to the region, right?
Yes, Tanka paintings. These are fascinating because they show the Buddhist influence in the region, especially in Lahal Spiti. They're painted on cotton or silk cloth using natural mineral colours.
What about woodwork? I've heard that's significant too.
Absolutely. Traditional wooden craft is a distinctive feature of Himachal Pradesh. The abundance of different wood species in the state has led to incredible carved doors, windows, and temples, especially in areas like Kulu, Chamba, and Kinnaur.
And these skills are passed down through generations?
That's right. Most folk art in Himachal is taught within families, without any formal training. It's how they've preserved these techniques for centuries.
But surely modernization must be affecting these traditions?
It is, and that's actually one of the biggest challenges facing Himachal's culture today. Recent studies show that displacement from development projects has significantly impacted traditional practices.
Can you give us an example?
Research indicates that among displaced communities, traditional occupation practitioners have decreased from 89% to just 23%. That's a dramatic shift in just one generation.
That's quite concerning. How are communities responding to these changes?
Well, there's actually been an interesting development with rural tourism. Many villages are now using tourism as a way to preserve their cultural heritage while creating economic opportunities.
Tell us more about that.
Villages are organizing cultural festivals, showcasing traditional crafts, and offering authentic experiences to visitors. It's helping strengthen the rural economy while preserving age-old customs.
That sounds like a positive development, but does it risk commercializing these traditions?
That's a valid concern. Studies show that while tourism brings economic benefits, it needs to be implemented with sensitivity toward conservation of ecology and indigenous culture.
Let's talk about festivals. How do they reflect Himachal's culture?
Festivals here are fascinating because they're not just celebrations, they're living museums of cultural practices. Each festival combines religious rituals, traditional music, dance, and local customs.
And the music and dance forms, they're unique to each region?
Yes. Take the Nati dance from Kulu or the Chamba dance. Each has its own distinct style and cultural significance. These aren't just performances, they're stories told through movement.
Speaking of stories, what role does storytelling play in Himachali culture?
Oral traditions are incredibly important here. Stories passed down through generations often contain practical wisdom about living in harmony with the mountain environment.
That's fascinating. And I imagine these stories also help preserve the local language?
Exactly. Though Hindi is widely spoken, many communities still use their local Pahari dialects, especially for traditional songs and stories.
Let's talk about the religious makeup of the region. What does that look like?
According to recent data, about 95% of the population is Hindu, but what's interesting is how this majority faith coexists with Buddhism, especially in the tribal areas.
And this religious diversity shapes the cultural landscape?
Absolutely. You'll find Hindu temples right next to Buddhist monasteries, and festivals often incorporate elements from multiple faiths. It's a beautiful example of cultural synthesis.
What about the younger generation? How are they engaging with these traditions?
That's actually one of the biggest challenges. Studies show that 78% of displaced families report severe disruption to ancestral practices, particularly affecting youth engagement.
Those are concerning numbers.
Yes, but there's hope. Many communities are finding innovative ways to make traditions relevant to younger people, like incorporating traditional art into modern design.
Can you give us an example?
Well, some young artists are using traditional Kangra painting techniques to create contemporary artwork, or applying traditional wood carving patterns to modern furniture.
That's a creative approach to preservation.
And it's working. These adaptations are helping keep traditional skills alive while making them economically viable for the next generation.
Let's talk about the role of women in Himachali culture.
Women have traditionally been the custodians of many cultural practices, particularly in areas like textile arts and ritual traditions.
And how is that changing with modernization?
Interestingly, many women are now leading the charge in cultural preservation while also pursuing modern education and careers. They're finding ways to balance both worlds.
That's encouraging to hear.
Yes, and it shows how tradition and progress can coexist when communities are empowered to guide their own cultural evolution.
As we wrap up, what do you think is the future of Himachal's cultural heritage?
The key will be finding that balance between preservation and adaptation. The communities that are succeeding are those that embrace change while holding on to their core cultural values.
Any final thoughts on what makes Himachal's culture so special?
It's the way the culture is so deeply intertwined with the landscape. The mountains aren't just a backdrop, they're characters in the story, shaping everything from art to spirituality.
That's beautifully put.
And you know what? That's why Himachal's culture has survived for so long. It's not just preserved in museums, it's lived every day in the valleys and villages of these magnificent mountains.
Well, that brings us to the end of today's episode of Co-Pilot Podcasts. We've journeyed through the cultural landscape of Himachal Pradesh, from its ancient temples to its living traditions. Remember, in these Himalayan valleys, every ritual, every craft, and every festival tells a story of survival